Idaho Matters podcast is brought to you by St. Luke's On-Demand Virtual Care, which allows patients to see a provider from their home using a computer or smartphone with on-demand care for common ailments, such as a cough, sore throat, or a sinus issue. More information at stlukesonline.org.
Since Boise State Public Radio was founded, students have been an integral part of day-to-day operations.
Hi, this is Josue Perez, and I'm an intern in the programming department. I'm a political science and biology major here at Boise State University, and Boise State Public Radio has given me so many opportunities outside of just productions. I really enjoy being on the backside of how many Idahoans get their global information.
Learn more and support at boisestatepublicradio.org.
More Idaho Matters now from the studios of Boise State Public Radio News. I'm Gemma Gaudette. You know how we're often told to play it safe at work or in a relationship, even maybe with our own ideas? Well, today we're talking about a book that suggests the opposite might sometimes be true. Safe Danger is a new book by Ben Swire, and it looks at how taking the right kind of risk can help us connect as well as find purpose and do more creative, meaningful work. And Ben is joining us today to talk more about this. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, Gemma. I'm really happy to be here.
So, Ben, I think the phrase "safe danger" it almost feels like a contradiction in a way. So, tell us what you mean by it, and when did you first realize it could actually be a useful way of thinking?
Yeah, I mean, it does sound like a contradiction, and most people do think of safety and danger as opposites. But what I found is that it's just more useful to think of them a little bit like dance partners. That safety gives us solid footing, but danger gives us movement. So, if we only chase safety, we stagnate. And if we only chase danger, we burn out. So safe danger is sort of the emotional sweet spot between the two, where people feel secure enough to leave security behind, but stretched enough to grow. And it's in that zone that I've just seen that's where connection and creativity and belonging really can thrive. You don't need to be fearless to grow, but you do need to be safe enough. You need to feel safe enough to try. A quick example of safe danger from my own life as a parent. When my daughter was 5, she used to stare up at those playground rings and dream of the day she'd be able to be like the big kids going across them. But it felt like too long a way down for her. So what I did is I lifted her up into the middle, made sure she had a solid grip, and then I asked her to do the scary thing on purpose. I told her to let go. And after a little bit of cajoling, she did. She dropped, she crumpled, she popped back up. And I said, look, that's as bad as it's going to get. That's the worst case. That's it. And from then on, she didn't hesitate because she knew 2 things: what failure felt like and that she could survive it. So that's safe danger sort of in a nutshell. It's small, real risks, but in a safe way so that it can build courage over time.
I think that's so interesting because I'm a parent as well. And the thing that I always say to my kids when they're hesitant is like, well, what's the worst thing that can happen? Right? What's the worst thing that can happen? They tell you no. They tell you you're not the right fit. Well, okay. I mean, so it's a no if you don't do anything. Right?
Right.
And I find that to be really interesting because in the book, you really talk about the fact that real connection and innovation, it does often require risk, right? So why do you think, though, that so many systems, I mean, especially in the workplace, are designed to really take any risk out of anything? Because I feel like you do need to take those small risks sometimes. It's almost like that leap of faith, right? Of like, I don't know where I'm going to land, but I probably should take that leap.
Yes, I think one of the biggest mistakes that most businesses and organizations and even families often make is confusing safety with comfort. Real safety isn't about removing that friction. It's about creating enough trust that people can risk being themselves, but still feel like they belong. I think that's a key piece, especially for innovation, because if everybody is just agreeing with each other, you don't get anywhere. Nothing new comes. You don't reach new ideas by repeating the same answers. You get it by asking the questions that no one had noticed before. And that happens when there's some friction, when there's different perspectives and different personalities coming in. But that's a risk, especially, these days, just historically, politically, where we are, standing out can be a threat. And so creating a place of safety means finding that balance where people can stand out, but still belong.
Mm. And in the book too, I mean, as you said, this is, yes, this is about the workplace, but you also talk about, just personal life and family. And, and this idea, what you just said, right? Comfort isn't necessarily, safety, right? And I think about in my own family, like our oldest is a senior in high school and he's getting ready to go to college in the fall. And I always tell people, I'm like, I am so excited for him. I am so sad for me. I am so sad for me. And all I want to do is keep him home. Like I want him, I'm like, we have a good university 2 miles down the road. Like I want to keep him home because that's what I want. And it would be the worst decision that I could ever make for him if I did that, because he is so ready to fly. He is so ready for that next big step, and yeah. And is that kind of what you're talking about with families, right? It's like, I would love it if he stayed home, but I know it would be the worst thing ever.
Absolutely. And I'm approaching that same threshold with my kids. And it is that sort of, the terrible curse of parenthood. The better you do it, the more pain it's going to cause you as they leave and find their own footing. But I think, a lot of families, a lot of leaders, a lot of businesses resist that sort of letting go because control feels safer than trust. When you can control things, when you can keep them in your sight, when you can, if you're at work, when you can walk the aisles and make sure people are working, if you're at home, when you can keep an eye on your kids, it allows you to feel like you're managing outcomes, you're controlling that risk, you can predict what's happening. And trust is different. It might unleash all sorts of wonderful things, creativity, innovation, all the stuff. But it also might mean that somebody drops the ball or disappoints you or makes a big mistake. And, in other words, it sort of means risking uncertainty. Mm-hmm. But I do think the paradox is that the thing that reassures us, that control, is also what suffocates the creativity, the loyalty, the drive that we most want to cultivate in the people around us. So that's another place that I've seen this sort of safe danger mentality become really useful, because if you can find that balance, or if you can create moments that bring in both elements, it invites a different kind of safety. It's one built on trust instead of certainty. So it asks people to stop thinking about how they can prevent the unexpected and start seeing, ways to prepare people to survive the unexpected, to come out the other side better and stronger for it.
In the book too, I mean, you really do you blend research with stories and even practical ideas. How important was it to you to make sure you blended all three of those, right? Instead of just like, well, here's my thoughts on it. There's actually research to back this up.
Well, I am a fan of research and data and stats, but I am deeply a humanities type person. So the stats and things are there because the work that I do is basically focused on team building in organizations and cultures. And a good portion of people, when they hear team building, just roll their eyes. They think of mini golf, they think of trust falls, they think of balloon towers, and they either would rather be at home with their families or getting the work done or whatever. So when I was writing this book, I was just aware of all the different personality types that we need to bring together. So, yes, I knew because of the nature of the book, anybody that likes to craft or any sort of artistic, creative person, I've got them to some degree already. They're going to give me a chance and listen to this. But a lot of other people that are more stats driven are going to need a little extra proof. So I made sure that everything I was talking about was backed up, which it is. And a lot of it is so counterintuitive that sometimes you need those stats to hear that, bringing joy to a workplace actually increases productivity, that getting vulnerable and helping build a culture of trust and curiosity actually decreases mistakes and encourages, retention, all that stuff. So being able to bring in the different types of personality types, I think, is really important. And if I'm being honest, I am one of those people that would have definitely rolled his eyes at the whole idea of team building. I am a cynical introvert by nature. I would rather, run for the hills than ever do another role-playing skit. So part of what I design when I put these together and when I was writing the book is how would I win myself over? What would I need to actually listen to these ideas? Because I didn't come to these on purpose. I discovered them along the way. My career took me in a lot of different directions. I spent a lot of time working on Wall Street in marketing for big financial firms. And then I went to this design and innovation firm called IDEO, which it was just like going from Kansas into Oz. It was an amazing sort of technicolor place of creativity and trust and connection and all the things I thought more or less were impossible if you were going to take your work seriously and really show up. And I started, because I'm a philosophy major, and I started taking it apart and trying to figure out what was going on here psychologically, personally, the dynamics, and started seeing that what they were doing was really investing in connecting their people on a personal level. The better the people knew each other as people, the stronger their professional collaborations became, because people could take risks. They could offer up half-baked ideas without worrying about being judged. They could take critique with the confidence that the people weren't trying to embarrass them or take them down, but make the work better. So it allowed for people to put their ego aside. It allowed for people to flourish. And it was all very counterintuitive because it was a place that thrived on joy and trust and curiosity and optimism and things that most workplaces and sometimes families see as nice to haves, the things that you can invest in when things are going well. And what I saw was that that's backwards, that it's those sort of things that really create a foundation so that when things get rocky, they don't all fall apart. You have a strong foundation and a great basis for getting through it all.
You also write about purpose in the book, and you say it's something that comes through action, not just, reflecting on like what your purpose is. So what does that look like, let's say, in someone's everyday life?
Well, I think, some of us are really blessed. They find their purpose early on. They feel like they're really adding something to the world, and that's great. But purpose is more, I think with a lot of people, they mistake talent or careers or opportunities for their purpose. And what I've seen is the people that are the most connected with what they do, that really feel the most driven to give of themselves and commit to what they're doing, are people who have found their purpose through what they have been through, what they've survived, what they have come out the other side of. It's a hard thing to talk about for a lot of people, but pain can be a compass sort of pointing to where you can contribute the most in the world because you've been through something that other people might not have been through. And so you have insights and you have perspective. And I think that can be a really useful way of discovering where you have a unique contribution to offer. The cracks and the dents that we all carry aren't liabilities. They're often the source of our best insights. There's a lovely line from the poet Rumi that says something like the crack is how the light gets in. And the idea there being that the places where you've struggled have made you stronger. And it's that strength that can add something powerful to the world if you acknowledge it and don't try to hide it and be embarrassed by it.
What do you hope that readers not just take away from the book, but is there anything you hope that maybe they reflect on or maybe do a little bit differently once they finish the book?
Yeah, I think in a broad stroke, I think most of us are sort of living someone else's life in a strange way. We're following expectations that we inherited instead of choices that we made. So many of us, come out middle school having learned to hide or diminish the qualities that make us unique because we want to fit in. So my hope is that the activities, the insights, the interviews in the book help people start to get a little distance and from the lives that they're living and start recognizing where they have made choices and where they haven't, where they've just inherited things, so they can start paying attention, for example, to the moments where they hold back, the comment that they almost made, the choice that they shied away from, because those are opportunities to recognize our true selves and to change course. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say that they write or sing or draw, but would never show it to anybody, God forbid. But I think if you can switch your mindset to a place where you stop trying to prove your critics wrong and try to prove your fans right, just start leaning into what you love with the confidence that that's enough. I think it makes a huge difference for people in the way they go through life in this world. And the other piece of it is, I think, if you risk showing up as your real self instead of someone else's version of you, it's not only a chance to rekindle that dimmed light and discover the parts of yourself that may have been scared into silence, but if you're not speaking with your own unique voice, then honestly, the world is missing out. The people that you love, that mean most to you, that look up to you, they're all missing out if you're not standing out as yourself. And so I hope that the book helps people find a little footing to do that.
Well, I want to thank you so much for taking time to talk with us. I really appreciate the conversation. We've been speaking with author Ben Swire about his new book, Safe Danger, an unexpected method for sparking connection, finding purpose, and inspiring innovation. This is the Idaho Matters podcast. I'm Gemma Gaudet.
Hi, it's Terry Gross, host of Fresh Air. Hey, take a break from the 24-hour news cycle with us and listen to long-form interviews with your favorite authors, actors, filmmakers, comedians, and musicians, the people making the art that nourishes us and speaks to our times. So listen to the Fresh Air podcast from NPR and WHYY.